if your lats still suck, even though you've been doing your vertical, wide grip pulls and your narrow grip rows for all of these years, then enter the Keenan Flap, created by Keenan Malloy. Yes, these two fruity looking ass exercises are superior to the basics when it comes to pure lat growth. And before you crash out at me in the comment section, Dorian Yates, yes, that Dorian Yates with the biggest fucking back in history performed the exact same movement. The only difference between the Keenan Flap and what Dorian Yates was doing is that Dorian had access to a pullover machine and he did it with both arms at a time. That's literally the only difference. It is anatomically the exact same fucking movement, okay? But what if you don't have a pullover machine, like 99% of us? And what if you want to hit the lower lats via the frontal plane and not just do a sagittal plane pull over? So please don't freaking hate on it if you haven't tried it yourself. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty details of why these exercises are so freaking good. For muscle prioritization purposes, isolation movements will always be superior to compound movements, as there are simply less muscle groups involved within an isolation movement, meaning that you get an increase in motor unit recruitment and therefore an increase in stimulus for that target muscle when you take all of these other muscle groups out of the equation. And the Keenan Flap, or just a pullover variation, is anatomically speaking the literal perfect exercise to train the lats, as lats perform only shoulder adduction and shoulder extension, meaning that you actually don't need or want to involve your biceps or elbow flexors, essentially doing a pulling movement, when you want to isolate the lats as maximally as possible. And if you're a compound cell and don't believe me,
who you calling pinhead?
Why the frick are you doing a biceps curl for your biceps and not just some compound chin-up movement? Because you believe that if you want to grow your biceps as maximally as possible, you, of course, need a curl, right? But why does that same logic not apply to the lats? But that is not the same. Yeah, it is. It is the same. It's 2025, brother. Please leave your ego at the side. You don't need to compound max every single exercise for every single muscle group. You are not a failure. You're not an absolute loser. You're not a pussy if you perform an isolation movement for your lats. And you're not hardcore if you solely rely on big, heavy compound movements for your back. No one fucking cares what exercise you do, how goofy you look while you're doing it, if your back looks fucking crazy, okay? The second benefit of these exercises are that they're unilateral. And for muscle prioritization purposes, again, unilateral training is superior to bilateral training due to the bilateral force deficit, which states that your ability to exert maximum contractions, meaning that you can activate and be as strong as fucking possible, is stronger when performing an exercise one limb at a time compared to two limbs at a time. Here's an example of how the bilateral force deficit manifests itself into the real life. So I can perform a single arm pushdown with 22 kilos per arm with a 1-to-1 cable pulley. Now you would expect me to perform a bilateral or dual arm pushdown with 44 kilos if the bilateral force deficit did not exist. But because it does exist, I can only perform 35 kilos on the bilateral pushdown variation. So as you can see, there's a big difference in the weight that I can use, and therefore the amount of muscle fibers that I can recruit when performing an exercise one or two limbs at a time. So these two factors, isolating the lats as maximum as possible, and also training the lat pullover variations with one arm at a time, maximizes motor recruitment, and therefore the stimulus you can get for the lats specifically, much more than you would ever get from a row, whether that's bilateral or unilateral. You will never get the amount of stimulus that you can get with the Keenan Flap or pullover variations. By the way, if you're tired of all of this overwhelming information out there, and you're tired of spinning your wheels, and you just want to get to your dream physique as efficiently and effective as possible, make sure to apply for my one-to-one online coaching service so that I can help you reach your goals. You can find the links in the description and comments down below. Okay, all of that is freaking great, but how the fuck do you actually set this exercise up? It's actually much easier than you think, and it won't cost you that much time after like the first try if you found your setup. So for the frontal plane pullover, you want to set the exercise up in a way so the peak torque occurs at 60 to 75 degrees of shoulder adduction, where the lower lats have the best relative leverage within the frontal plane. For the sagittal plane pullover, you want to set the exercise up in a way so that peak torque occurs at 25 to 55 degrees of shoulder extension, where the upper lats have the best relative leverage within the sagittal plane. How you specifically, yes, I mean you, set the exercise up depends entirely on your equipment available. But I just like to shove the foot of my bench against the cable tower using a bench incline roughly around 60 degrees plus so that I can actually reach the cable tower and not be too far away from it. This could be different for everyone. The steeper the incline is of the bench, the more stable you will be within that exercise and the better of a stimulus you can get within that exercise. Now I just set up the cable pulley height so that I essentially have a dead stop happening before I go out of the lad's active range of motion, which occurs at around 90 degrees in both the frontal and sagittal plane. Now here's some equipment or cable attachment considerations. So you can perform the Keenan Flap with a standard as wrist cuff and do it that way, but I personally like to use an elbow cuff as the lads, again, just to shoulder extension and adduction, meaning that the lads only attach to the shoulder and not the elbow joint. And if you take out the elbow joint from stabilizing, like in the normal wrist cuff variation, you can further increase the motor recruitment for the lads specifically. But for me, that's not the only reason why I'm doing it this way. The primary reason is that it's much more comfortable to perform the exercise. It's much more comfortable for the shoulder joint itself when the pad or the cuff is at the elbow and not at the wrist, as it feels so cancerous for my shoulder when I do it with like a wrist cuff. It feels like popping out as the lever and the amount of torque that gets created at the shoulder is so freaking huge when you have like this huge ass moment arm, right? But when you use a elbow cuff instead of a wrist cuff, that moment arm gets reduced. You can therefore also lift a lot more weight, but it just feels much more comfortable for the shoulder joint itself. Another huge benefit of the elbow cuff is that you can essentially perform the exercise just you would a row and a pull down. It feels much more natural to just focus on pulling your elbow into your body, depending on which variation you're doing, instead of like doing this flapping motion, right? The question you may be asking yourself throughout this whole video is, do I actually freaking need this? So if you have good lat genetics and you enjoy normal pulling exercises and your lats respond well to that, you don't need the Keenan Flap, okay? You will do just fine with standard as pulling variations. But if you have shitty lat genetics and no matter what the frick you do, your lats just don't respond well, even though you're doing the perfect exercises, the perfect frequency, blah, 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 then introducing Keenan Flap into your program might be worth a consideration. I would highly freaking recommend it. I was also skeptical as freaking hell, but I've implemented it into my program for like 1 month now, and I freaking love it. It looks goofy, but I don't give a fuck what anybody says. I already feel like my lats, they are getting a bit poppier, a bit thicker, a bit rounder. It may seem silly that I'm saying this after just 1 month, but I swear I'm not delusional. I literally see difference occurring. Maybe that's like newbie gains or whatever, but I freaking love it. And I'm sure if you really desperately want to bring up your lats because they suck, you will love them too. Now, if you've decided that you want to implement these exercises into your program, I will now quickly in 15 freaking seconds explain to you how to program them in the most optimal way to give you the best possible stimulus, okay? Perform both the frontal and sagittal plane pullover 2 or 3 times per week. The more frequency, the better for muscle prioritization purposes. And you want to perform 1 to 2 sets per exercise per session. The more frequency you have, the less sets you need. The less frequency you have, the more sets you will benefit of. Now, very important, if you actually care about bringing up your lats as maximally as possible, you want to perform these exercises at the very start of every single session that you perform them, okay? Now, with your newly grown wings, make sure to fly over to my website and apply for my one-to-one online coaching service. You can find the links in the description and comments down below. I would fucking love to work with you, and see ya.